Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Mukta Lele, and on behalf of the TechX.in team at Venture Center, I am happy to host the third wave of our Only One Team Awareness Talk series on innovation management. Today is the 15th talk in this particular wave series. This talk also marks an important milestone of 50th talk overall in the Only One Thing talk series. So before we begin the introductions and the session today, let us quickly glimpse to a few notable highlights in this series so far. So with this 50th talk today in this overall talk series, let us start with today's session. And today's topic, which we discuss, is setting up a technology transfer office. Our distinguished speaker for today is Dr. Premnath V. Let me briefly introduce Dr. Premnath before we begin the talk. Dr. Premnath is a scientist in the Polymer Science and Engineering Division at NCL and Founder Director of Venture Center. He is a technology developer, innovation and incubation manager, startup mentor, and a co-founder of two medtech startups. For the last 17 plus years at Venture Center, he has provided leadership for teams that have won national awards for technology development, intellectual property management, and business incubation. Dr. Premnath is a chemical engineer by training and an alumnus of MIT in the US. He has also received the IIT Bombay Distinguished Alumnus Award in 2022, and he has been a Chevening Technology Enterprise Scholar in Cambridge, UK. With this brief introduction, I welcome you, Dr. Premnath, and hand over the session to you.
All right. Thank you, Mukta. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly.
Can you see my screen?
Yes. Your video is on?
No. We'll start. Just give me a minute. Yeah?
Sure.
Okay. I hope everybody else can also hear me clearly. So I'll get started with this session. Please alert me. There was somebody in the audience who said that they can't hear clearly. Just check up if the sound is okay.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay. Let's begin. Today's topic is about tech transfer offices. While I'm going through these slides and talking about the topic, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat box, and we will take it up at a suitable point as well. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about TTO, starting with what is a TTO and why do you need a TTO? And then finally go on to talk a little bit about how to set it up and operate it. I'll only, since this particular talk is usually intended as something we should close within the hour, I will touch upon a few topics, and there will be opportunities for some of you to learn a little bit more when we run a little more detailed programs coming up in April and June, which I'll tell you briefly about as well. So thank you for joining in. I hope some of this is useful for all of you in your own organizations as well. So here I'm going to draw upon some of my experiences from one CSIR National Chemical Laboratory, where set up a group, which is a department called NCL Innovations Resource Center, the intellectual property group, and we also set up certain specialized programs for venturing. Venture Center, of course, is another organization that I'm deeply involved with. There are incubation programs, funding programs, investment programs, IP facilitation center, and the regional tech transfer office, which operate from here. And those are all relevant in some ways to the discussion of today's discussion as well. There was also an effort at the CSIR level, which was called CSIR Tech, which was a tech marketing and tech transfer entity meant to be a standalone entity. There are some lessons from there as well. Also, interactions with other TTOs as an inventor, both India and overseas, where I've seen at least how some of these organizations have operated in some of the good practices as well, and also in advising some of the R&D organizations in India on some of these TTOs and how they operate. So let me draw upon that. Just a few clarifications first. One, when I use the term tech transfer, right, I'm talking today about primarily a situation where uh, it's technology created in academia or R&D labs, or with a major role by academia and R&D labs, and it getting translated and taken to industry, startups, or other intermediaries, right? There are other places where this terminology is also used, and correctly so, but that's not the scope of today's discussion. One is where there is tech transfer from the industry to industry. For example, Reliance, say, buying technology for a polyethylene plant or a polypropylene plant from Union Carbide or Dow. Though that's an entirely different ballgame in many ways. I'm not going to cover that or look at that kind of tech transfer. Another, which is you commonly hear about, is in the biopharma industry, where technology gets transferred from R&D to production, and there's no dealings there. It's the same organization, and that's also not what I plan to cover in today's discussion. There are also other cases where there are technology translation entities which transfer to industry. For example, medicines for malaria venture, or FIND, which is for diagnostics, transferring to industry, which again is not the focus today. I'm talking primarily of academia and R&D lab transferring to industry, startup, or intermediaries. Another sort of clarification regarding the scope: the different types of tech transfer organizations, and what which are relevant to academic and R&D lab, and you should know about it. But I'm going to talk about today TTOs, tech transfer offices dedicated to, say, a given organization. I'm not talking about some others which are also play an important role, but this is not the subject matter today. One which is another category, for example, are technology marketing agencies or companies. For example, in India, examples include NRDC or BCIL or SMC, which is Sadhguru Management Consultants in India. Also, regional tech transfer offices. For example, Venture Center runs something called a TechX.in, and there's several others which have been set up by NVM and BIRAC. In the US, for example, Research Triangle Institute in the US, the Research Triangle Park area is an example of an RT TO as well. There are also associations, and these associations play an important role in the field. Uh, Associations of tech transfer professionals, for example, say STEM Global in India, or Autumn in USA. There can be associations of offices as well, not individuals. And for example, there's something for the federal labs called FLC, which is there in the US as well. So if some of you want to be in the tech transfer field, you might want to look up STEM Global, which is a association of Indian technology transfer professionals, which runs annual events as well, and that's something which you might want to look up after this talk. We are also going to run something in the near future. So before, I just wanted to alert you all that we'll have a great opportunity in April, from 22nd to 25th April, to host talks by three very prominent names in the tech transfer field. Dr. Ashley Stevens from Boston, Dr. Richard Cahoon from Cornell, and John Fraser, who will be speaking from actually Utah, but he was responsible for quite a lot of tech transfer from Florida State and Simon Fraser University. All three have been board members of the U.S. American Association for University Technology Managers, and this is something some of you might want to look up if you're interested. We have been sending this information out, but the site to look up is www.techtransfer.online. This event is courtesy of support by the FLCTD program of the United Nations, along with BE and GEF, which Venture Center is implementing. We'll also have the benefit of having some Indian experts, Raj Hirwani, Arvind Chinchure, and Anu, who specializes in marketing as well. And our chief guest will be Dr. Praveen Roy from DSC, who runs the Technology Translation and Innovation program. Following this and more, which I'll tell you towards the end. So let me get started. What is a TPO? Let me start with that first. So when we talk about, first let's understand what is tech transfer. When I'm talking about tech transfer here, I'm talking about the process of moving industrially useful knowledge created in academia and research institutions and putting it to practical use in industry and startup in order to produce products and services that can eventually deliver socio-economic impact for society. A couple of points here. One, it is about a process of transition, right? From one party to another, that multiple parties involved, which means you have to do dealings, right? It's for useful knowledge or know-how, so to say, and various things that might go along with it, like intellectual property. It's from academia, research institutions to people who actually, create a business out of it, industry, startups, and so on and so forth. And the eventual goal is to create socio-economic impact for society, and that's what you're, very often you're getting funded to do here. There's another terminology in this field which all of you should be familiar with, which is called knowledge exchange. It's a little bit of an umbrella term, larger than tech transfer, which refers to any mechanism that allows academia and research universities or labs to essentially transmit that knowledge or know-how to industry or startups, and that could be in any form, including through people, knowledge workers who move from one organization to another, consulting, scientific services, R&D, collaborations, and of course, just tech transfer itself, right? So this is something which is used a little more commonly in Europe, and this is information that you should be generally familiar with. Now, with this background, I think it's now quite clear what a tech transfer office is. It's basically an office that enables tech transfer, as I defined it earlier, an office of an academic organization or R&D lab, and champions the cause of tech transfer. Why? Why is it important? All that we will discuss. There can be different types of tech transfer offices in different formats. One example is that it is, say, a part of a department. So, for example, in many CSIR labs, you will find business development divisions, and one part of that activity might be tech transfer. In, say, IIT Bombay, you would have an IRCC, which does that job as part of its activities. IIT Madras, it might be ICNSR, which has a arm which works on tech transfer. BITS Pilani also has a similar segment of a department which works on tech transfer as well. And in many US universities, you'll find tech transfer function embedded in the Office of Sponsored Research, especially in the smaller US universities. They may not have a standalone department. But there'll be some places where there might be standalone departments. In NCL, there's a technology management group. In MIT, they have something called the US Technology Licensing Office. In Stanford, there's something called an Office of Technology Licensing, OTL. You can also have separate entities. This is occasionally there. It's not as common as you might think, right? An example of this is, for example, FITT in IIT Delhi. That would be an independent entity which has a very important role in tech transfer for IIT Delhi. NRDC, when it was first set up in 1953, was actually meant to be a separate entity supporting tech transfer for CSIR labs. Similarly, BCIL was also set up with the intention of supporting some other DBT labs in India. In the US, a very famous organization is WARF, which is essentially the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, and it was one of the earliest TTOs, and it was set up by the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Oxford Innovations in UK, Cambridge Enterprise in UK, or the Mass General Brigham for MGH and Brigham Women's Hospital of Harvard Medical School are little examples of entities which have been created in order to facilitate some of these kind of activities. But this is not necessarily required. It depends on the context of each organization, and I will try to speak to that as well. Okay. Okay, so what are the different roles a tech transfer office can play? There are many that are possible. So here is a little bit of a laundry list of different roles. We will come and zero in on a few on how they could be organized in an organization. So let me just put down a few roles. One, of course, relates to awareness, training, and enabling policies. Many organizations, you need to create the base of policies to enable such technology related transactions to happen, and then build awareness and training around with all the scientists, students, and so on, so that this process actually bears some results at the end of the day. Identifying and sourcing technology assets is another very important activity. Sometimes it is about finding um, scouting in the lab to find ideas which can then be translated into IP and then taken ahead as well. Uh, Once you have something which you think is an asset, potential asset, you might want to look at how to protect it. So IP protection and management can be one of the important activities. What extent you do it in-house is a different matter, but this is an important role as well. The leadership often needs to take decisions around these strategies for IP protection or commercialization, the routes to take, how much to invest, and so on and so forth. So there's amount of decision support that is needed, and that some of the tech transfer offices play as well. There is element of translation and improving the readiness of the technology, and associated with that, certain institutions also have some amount of proof of concept funding. So technology might be at a very early stage. You might think that you need to advance it a little bit more, valorize it before an industry partner is interested. And how would you do it? And if you need to do it, how would you fund it? Some institutions around the world have created their own proof of concept funding as well. And there are also pockets of funds which have been created in certain institutions, which actually are from third parties supporting these activities. The famous one is, the proof of concept funding from the Deshpande Center at MIT in the US, which is interesting. And I think there's a similar one in San Diego as well. The next category of activity is assessing these technologies. Very often you'll have a large pool of IP and technology coming to you, and you need to decide which ones you want to focus on, which ones you need to take ahead, how do you want to take it ahead. And another important aspect here is trying to understand what the technology brings as value to a potential licensee, right? Because you have to eventually go and sell that to a potential licensee. And that becomes the heart of the next activity, which is technology marketing. So when you are marketing technology to potential buyers or licensees, you need to communicate what value it creates for them. So the value proposition becomes the heart of that analysis, and really communicating it in more powerful ways in different mechanisms, different vehicles as well. Advancing a lead, once you have a lead from some of these marketing efforts, how do you take it closer to a deal is the next step. And that requires some patient and persistent pursuit of a lead till it reaches a conclusion. When when a buyer or a licensee is willing to make a deal, you need to create deal structures. You need to eventually, that will become agreements which you can sign with that party on what the transaction will look like. And that deal structuring effort is another very important aspect of what technology transfer professionals do. You also need to understand how to come up with the commercial terms and broad frameworks to assess what could be sources of value are very important. Of course, valuation is always a matter of an issue where beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. So the value is very often determined by essentially what a buyer is willing to pay and what you are willing to sell it at. But that said, there are frameworks at least to understand what could be the sources of value and where it could be positioned in terms of value. And then comes the next stage of negotiations, closing a deal, followed by post-deal contract management to the life cycle of the agreement that you're signing. You need to take it all the way till the end of the agreement, make sure that all the terms are honored by all the parties, and finally concluded when the duration of the agreement ends. There are, of course, what I described so far is a typical technology licensing kind of workflow and different parts of it. But increasingly in the coming years, the, the technology venturing and creation of startups is becoming a very important aspect of how academia is now commercializing the technology ideas that they are generating over a period of time. So many universities around the world, you'll find, will have a technology venturing or a spin out kind of activity built into their tech transfer offices. You can choose to do it separately or as part of it. And associated with them, there might be some seed funding available as well. And in some universities around the world, this number is very large. For example, the number I've been reading about for Oxford exceeds almost 500 million pounds of money available for creating some of these spinouts as well. So there's a large investing activity as well in some of these organizations. And then there are other models of technology commercialization which are actually quite important in depending on a case-to-case basis. If you are a hospital, for example, or you're creating clinical data, you might need to know how to protect and deal with data, right? How do you transact the clinical data within the rules? If you're, say, in the business of, say, 5G communications and telecom, then you need to worry about the fact that there are standards which have been defined in the industry, and whether your patents are essential patents for those standards or not. And there are models within that community of how licensing will happen of those standard essential patents. So there are unique cases, and there are very different cases depending upon the situation. I won't have time to go through that. Some of you who want to learn a little bit more about each of this, in June, we shall be doing a deep dive with some of our US mentors. And this is planned, and it will be announced shortly. Event supported by FLCTD program of UNIDO. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a look at why you need a TTO and a few insights on some observations first on because there are a lot of myths around the whole idea of a TTO, and it's important to be realistic and to understand how this whole process works. So let me give you a little bit of a glimpse of that. First of all, here in this slide, I'm showing you recent numbers from an infographic set up by Autumn. Autumn is the US's Association for University Technology Managers. All the tech transfer offices professionals are usually a member of Autumn. And you will see how they are really looking at the numbers and what are the kind of numbers you're seeing over there. It's quite remarkable to see that tech transfer has contributed to 1.9 trillion in US gross industrial output. It's fascinating to just see the impact that academic tech transfer can create. Many of the drugs that you hear about, you can see here 200 plus drugs, vaccines were developed originally in academia, and then absorbed into the industry in some form or the other. And every country wishes to replicate this kind of productivity. I don't have China's numbers, but they are also very impressive in terms of patents and so on and so forth. An important point I wanted to also point out is this right-hand side image, which Autumn has standardized on benefiting society and economy, and it's called the tech transfer life cycle. And you can see the numbers of how the kind of research expenditure, the kind of inventions, kind of IP being filed, the kind of licensing numbers, the new products created, and so on and so forth. Please keep in mind, these numbers are very large, these research expenditures, and out of them come out, say, about under 10,000 licenses and options executed in 2023. This is for 2023, right? So people often forget that there's considerable research expenditure happening to make all this possible. It doesn't happen easily if one is not really investing in research, and you won't get the kind of same results if you're being very shallow in terms of research expenditures as well. Now, the same thing, I'll show you now what MIT TLO has put up, the Technology Licensing Office of MIT. And the right-hand side, you'll immediately notice that they're using the same technology transfer life cycle chart of Autumn, which has been standardized by them. And on the left, you see a lot of numbers on the number of patents being filed and so on, so forth. You will see that the US patents filed is about 600 or so. Please look, I also noticed that there is about $2 billion in research expenditure. To just give you a little bit of context, $2 billion in research expenditure would be about, say, 16 to 17,000 crores. Okay. And that is probably 3 to 4 times of CSIR's budget. Okay, so it's one institution. So it is important to keep this in context. So one has to find resources to invest. That doesn't mean that others cannot do it, but it will be proportionately lower in numbers when you are trying to compete with such large numbers as well. I wanted to also point out the number of licenses. So about 140 that an office of this kind handles, about 24 startups in a year. So if you're doing 1, 2, 3, 4 startups compared to this kind of investment, you might be doing actually quite well. But of course, there's an invisible side to it, which is also very important, which is that, we are quite aware from the various stories we hear about the pioneering contributions to life-changing technologies that many of us use every day, which came out of MIT. Say an example of the Moderna mRNA vaccine, or for example, the Amazon, the Amazon. I'm forgetting the name of the booklet, which is where you read on this to read books. You get these little booklets. I'm forgetting the name, but it's not backlit. That also comes from there, and many of us are familiar using those as well. Somebody in the chat box remembers, please tell me the name. I forgot for a moment out there, right? Okay. Now, they're also well-known inventors, startup founders, famous companies, and of course, we know how it has powered the East Coast economy in Route 128 as well. And we remember those, and those are important contributions that we think of when we think of academia and their contributions and what they have done. But you'll notice that those factors do not show up in the immediate numbers that MIT has put out in these numbers out here. But probably those are more important because that's what builds credibility for a research organization. So here's a similar set of numbers from the Stanford Office of Technology Licensing. And again, you will see that in a year, they evaluated about 568 technologies and signed about 115 agreements. So these are the top organizations. So you can get a sense of scale compared to what smaller organizations might be doing. And the total royalty income, etc., was about $59 million, right? So in MIT's case, by the way, that income was about $39 million last year. There are years when it spiked, but most of the time, let's say it is about this much, which means that it is under 2%, okay, of the research expenditure that they are earning to tech transfer. And please keep that number in mind. When you look at the 50 years experience of Stanford, you hear, of course, great role models, great companies like Google and so on and so forth that you hear about. And in about 50 years work, they have shown about $2 billion in, licensing revenue in the last 50 years. And of course, very famous for names, including functional antibodies, PageRank algorithm of Google, recombinant DNAs, CD47 cancer immunotherapy, transcription mediated amplification, big technologies which have made a huge dent, right? Again, remember that this 2 billion should be kept in contrast, that should be kept in, is 50 years revenue in contrast to say the same number for 1 year's research expenditure. Okay. So it's still about, all the numbers are still under 2% typically. But again, what really matters is the fact that they're known for technology achievements, for great companies, for powering the West Coast and the Silicon Valley in the US as well. And that is an important thing, which it doesn't come up in the numbers that you see here. And that's something which Stanford has been very clear about from day one, which is they say that their contribution as a technology transfer office is towards these things on the right here, which are societal contributions rather than necessarily the immediate tech transfer that returns that they can show as a organization. So why is it important? Why is tech transfer important, and what is the important role that tech transfer offices play for academia and R&D? The most important role that it plays is that it demonstrates to society the usefulness of academic research, of research labs, right? Uh, in many more visible ways than just educating the next generation of leaders and workers for society. And this basically gets the support of stakeholders. So you can imagine that if MIT and Stanford were to pitch for funding, I think their credibility is very high and they're likely to receive that kind of support as well, right? Very easily. And that is probably the most important reason why academic and research organizations need to think of tech transfer and a TPO. There are, of course, other important reasons as well. It tends to attract faculty, scientists, students to academic and research organizations, especially those who are keen to see the research put into use for benefit of people. Many young researchers are motivated by seeing it in end use, seeing that their work has seen some useful end point, and that is something which TPOs can enable. Besides that, it also helps all these organizations engage with the corporates, with startups, and therefore they bring real world problems to academic researchers. So you're not operating in vacuum. You're not operating in an imaginary world, but a real world where you know that these are the problems and that you can help solve it as well. Of course, it's much better when the industry brings you more challenging problems and not trivial problems. I mean, maybe academics will be more happy or happier solving those. But that said, problem is a problem and it needs to be solved. And finally, it presents an opportunity to create new revenue streams. But as I told you, please remember that this is not the primary goal. It is also relatively small compared to the research expenditure. And if there isn't depth or uniqueness in the technology being offered, you will not also be easily finding takers or substantial revenue in any case. Okay, so I still want to just reiterate the most important reason you need to do tech transfer and set up a tech transfer office is to demonstrate your usefulness to society and economy. Okay, and that brings you a lot of returns, even including sizable grants. So just imagine if MIT says $2 to $3 billion in research grants, that's coming in because people know that there's useful work output coming to society from the work that's being done over there. Okay, now there are some myths. So as I first myth I've clarified already, which is that TT earnings can substitute grants and contracts. No, it doesn't. There's no evidence of that. The best of global institutions earn up to 2 to 5% of their R&D budget. Okay. The second, that technology transfer is a commercial activity. Well, technology transfer, in my view, is not a commercial activity. It's a vehicle to realize the mandate of most academic and research organizations to disseminate knowledge and know-how, right? It's also to disseminate know-how. And this is a mechanism to disseminate know-how and bring the benefits of knowledge to society. And tech transfer is a delivery mechanism for that. When you file a patent, one of the most important things it does is it gives reasons to a potential licensee to actually invest in your technology or your idea to take it further down the road. If they did not have an edge, and if anybody could copy the same thing after investing several years of work and lots of money, then they would be not so motivated to do it. And that's what your patents allow you to do. So actually, you're doing it because you want your ideas to finally hit the market and be useful to you. One other myth you hear is that technology transfer is a distraction to the main activity of teaching in academia and R&D institutions. Again, that's not true, because technology development and its translation to actual products and services of use to society not only sort of provides access to real world problems to researchers, but it also trains students in real world situations, also inspires and attracts faculty who are really motivated by serving society. See, there will be people who can always work in the private sector. Probably they'll get a better deal in terms of earnings and so on and so forth. But people are motivated to do this because they think they're contributing to society in many more ways. Teaching is one of them. Training the next generation of people is one, but they also want to see their ideas put to use, and they have role models of eminent scientists who have done that very successfully in the past and are remembered for those contributions. So that is another. It's actually a core activity. It's not really a distraction, in my opinion, as well. Okay, so let's continue. Here are a few important lessons I just want to share with you based on a few numbers which was generated by especially somebody called Oren Hershowitz, who is a professor who leads the tech transfer activity for Columbia University. And I've just summarized some results, but the data is from him. And he spoke about this in the National Academy in the US some years back, and I was grateful to receive a copy of his presentation from him. First, innovation is a portfolio game of numbers and odds, and it's very hard to pick winners up front. So if you're in a tech transfer operation, trying to say that this particular technology is going to be the winner up front and that I'm going to put all my eggs in this basket is not a wise thing to do. Okay. Nobody could have predicted that Google's PageRank algorithm would be a winner for Stanford, right? And Stanford had to, understand that and also generously license it out, not necessarily thinking that that's going to be the real winner out there, right? An investment should not be treated as a production process. There is a common misconception which you hear that they think that research activity can be thought of like a factory where you put some inputs in and you get some outputs out, right? Uh, in fact, the research and innovation is actually an exercise in producing failures, not necessarily successes. Because if you don't dare to do those failures, you cannot find those success stories. So it's almost like why you would invest in an army, right? You don't invest in an army because they need to fight a war every day, right? It is because you want to create options for the day when you need to fight a war that you invest in some of this. And this should be kept in mind by most tech transfer professionals as well. So here's some data from Oren. It roughly shows you, I just want to summarize it. The slides you will see online because it will be on YouTube as well. You will notice that there is a funnel out here which is being shown of how the research funding gets converted to invention disclosures. Those get converted to patent applications. Those get converted to patent awards, and then into active licenses, and then into startups, and so on and so forth. Right? This is one part of the funnel that you see, and you can see that the research expenditure in 2018 was say 72 billion. So each invention in the US, at least, I don't have Indian numbers. It will be a little better in India, but in some of the better institutions. But the four per about $10 million in research expenditure. And a product, if you look at it, it was 0.1 for about 100 million and $10 million that one is talking about. New startups, again, about the same as new products. And most licensing was to SMEs and not to large companies. Okay, most of the deals that they struck were with small companies. Now, this funnel that you see here doesn't end here. It leads into further funnels, right? The university funnels, and it goes to the industry. And you see that if it's a new compound for, say, drug discovery, again, it'll go down by a factor of 100,000, 10,000 as it comes out. And finally, there's a success. So what's going to make it to the other end, the odds of that are not obvious right up front. Okay. And you have to play the numbers game is one lesson. So what does it mean for practically for tech transfer offices, say in Indian organizations, is that you need to create a large pool of technologies rather than trying to guess which one is going to be the winner and try to protect only that. And Stanford's number is also around, 1 in 5 that gets into even a license. 5 in 100 that gets into even a license eventually. So if you don't have those 100, it's not possible to get those 5 also, because you don't know which is going to be successful at all, right? It's also important to note that few technologies actually finally get licensed, and a fewer still will make money, right? So the odds of success in terms of seeing a product are low, but odds of success in terms of money is even lower. But that said, it's nonetheless an exercise in taking it to the market. It will serve some purposes. And this money is not a reflection of what success it has in the economy, because you know that scales in sizes much more than what the technology transfer income reveals, right? So it's important to keep in mind that one or two might be the important ones that really show that you can make a huge dent. One other quick lesson is that it takes time to take it to market, especially if it's deep science. And don't be in a great hurry to abandon IP assets or technologies just because you think that there aren't any takers. And timing is extremely important, but very unpredictable of when it will succeed. So here is some data from Columbia University, which shows that you can see that if you look at license disclosures, a number of disclosures which were licensed, and these are cumulative numbers, it takes many years, right? So you will find that, out of the deals that they did, 55% were done by year 3, 85% by year 6. And these are out of the deals done. So there are fewer deals done than the big pool that they had as well. So it does take time. So year 3, year 6, and so on. Now, there are organizations which think that they need to abandon the technology asset within a year if they don't find a taker. I think it's very unreasonable, and that's something which we should be very careful not to do. And also, if you look at the numbers in terms of revenues that are produced out of tech transfer, you will see that the big winners take a lot of time. So here, you will notice that there are tech transfers which have resulted in revenue only after 10 years. The two messages from here: that share the risk and the reward with your licensees if you can, and also don't expect early returns, especially if your science is deeper and not necessarily everything is ready. It takes time to get it to market as well. So if you're designing your own tech transfer office, here are a few pointers. This Many of you will be familiar with the theory of change and how activities are designed to convert inputs to outputs, outcomes, and impact. So in a tech transfer office, you're essentially taking staff and funds, carrying out certain important activities and producing some outputs, outcomes, and impact. What I've tried to tell you is that it's important for tech transfer professionals to focus on impact and communicate the impact, which is the last box that you see out here, which has got to do with economic impact, societal impact, new opportunities, for example, number of lives saved, okay, or the economy built, which may have no correlation with what was your tech transfer revenue. For example, Google's impact is so large. Its tech transfer revenue for Stanford might be very small, okay, compared to that. But that doesn't reflect necessarily the impact that you have had, or the reputation or track record that you build, and the leaders in industry and entrepreneurship that you can say, come from the kind of organizations you have built. And in between, you'll have outputs and outcomes. You'll often find that many of our organizations are just focusing on saying how many patents they have filed or the agreements they have signed, or sometimes they show earnings. But there's more to it in terms of outcomes and then impact as well. So I'll stop on this topic here. If some of you are still not convinced you need to have a TTO for larger purposes, well, one of the NRF ranking parameters does talk about this. If you look up the innovation rankings, you'll find Tech Transfer Center or office mentioned here as well. There's another talk which I've done before, which you can see on YouTube on the Only One Theme playlist as well. So let's now move on to the next phase, the next part of this talk, which is about how to set up and operate a TPO in your organization. So what decides the structure of the TTO? I told you that there could be parts of a department, there could be a department, there could be an independent entity. All of these are possible, but you might want to decide what you wish to do based on your own unique circumstances. Do you have enough volume of technology development activities in your organization, right? Uh, that's very variable in different organizations. Some may or may not have done it, encouraged it in the past, may want to do it now. Some have a long track record of doing it. Not every organization has placed tech transfer as an important mandate or mission of the organization. And therefore, it might reflect how they position the tech transfer activity in their organization. Uh, how tech transfer is resourced is a very important consideration. How will it be funded? How will the people be, brought into that role? What kind of in-kind support is available? In some organizations, if they are well resourced, they can even think of a standalone entity from the very beginning. So, for example, some of the IITs benefited enormously from having alumni supporting some of these activities, right? And therefore, they were able to put that out as an important activity. Availability of leadership for tech transfer functions. At the end of the day, the director of the organization has to rely on people who drive these activities. And if they are not available, they need to be subsumed by somebody else who plays that role. And that eventually becomes a department or a part of a department. That's a practical issue that we see in many organizations in India as well. Beyond this, one has to think about the parent organization's views and strategy on how they want to position their tech transfer offices. Some organizations think of their tech transfer organizations as exclusively and very sharply aligned to only certain metrics of or certain delivery goals, certain KPIs of that organization. On the other hand, some others may choose to create a larger ecosystem and see how they can leverage that larger ecosystem, because today, they may not necessarily have that very large pipeline or the networks to create success stories in a very short term. So you can think of it both ways. On one side, one which is exclusively focused on only your organization's technology and so on and so forth. Another which builds a larger network, therefore identifies, oh, this company, that company is interested in this. Let's take a larger view, build relationships, and over a period of time, build a very strong pipeline for the organization. And depending upon that, you can also choose what kind of a structure you want. For example, if it's sharply aligned, it will probably be a department. If it is an ecosystem play, it could be an independent organization, right? Also, the national tax laws and related laws and rules also play a role in deciding how you will structure it. If the tax laws are favorable, a separate entity might be useful. If it is not and favors an academic organization, you might build it in as a department as well. The ability also, the willingness to engage supporting service providers. If you don't have the flexibility to engage service providers, it might hamper the way you do your tech transfer, especially if you don't have internal competencies to do it entirely on your own as well. So I showed you this slide of all the functions. Let me now slightly break it up. Okay, so you could organize it slightly differently, these same roles, where you have subparts to it, and this is something which we have seen in several organizations as well. So one set of activities out of these on the left are related to IP protection and portfolio management. Okay. And here it includes awareness, policies, identifying, sourcing technology assets, protecting it carefully, making sure the ownership rights are clear and the patent analytics are clear for decision support. It limits yourself to that. You will notice that the kind of skill sets here are slightly different than the skill sets in other activities that I list below. Another set of activities has to do with valorizing technology assets. Here, you're taking technology, say, at a readiness level which is lower and taking it to a higher readiness level, but it involves actual laboratory work or actual advancement of technology, and therefore it is different from, say, what an IP guy might do or a technology marketing guy might do, but advancing it. And there, many organizations have today set up internal proof of concept funding buckets to drive it, and it's more of project management activity taking it ahead in terms of de-risking. The third bucket here is technology marketing and transactions. This is where you have something to sell, you have something which you can license, then you're basically assessing it, creating a story around it of value propositions, finding who will be interested, marketing it, getting the lead developed, closing the deal, you know, setting up a commercial structure around it, negotiating it, closing, and then managing the contract. Right. This is traditionally very often treated as a core activity of a tech transfer cell or an organization, and this is something which I'll tell you, you could also do it with partners, but this is another bucket of activity. And finally, the last bucket here, increasingly these days, lot of academic and research organizations are finding that startups is the way to go, especially for early stage technology. And as startups become more and more important, venturing has become more and more important. And so many tech transfer offices have a subset of activities focused on venturing and creating new spin-outs, new companies, and that as a model for translating technology. Increasingly, the proportion of cases which are traditional licenses versus spin-out is changing quite rapidly. For example, in UK, the last numbers I saw, the number of startups is much higher than even the traditional licensing. In the US, it has all for many years it was the other way around, but increasingly you're seeing a lot of startup activity increasing in proportion to the traditional licenses that one is seeing in the field as well. And many of these groups also run their own seed funding. And many universities have endowments which they've been able to employ for that purpose. In India, some small amount of, I've seen directors put in some small amount of internal seed funding to advance technology a little further. And also, there are other models of technology commercialization which need to be considered, which are treated separately. It could be, say, technologies relating to TV or technologies relating to telecommunications, where there are a lot of standards involved, where there are multiple parties involved in taking anything to market itself. The same buckets, I have tried to map the kind of skill sets needed to make things work. And you will notice that the first category of IP protection and portfolio management is a little heavier on science and engineering understanding and IP law. And you might end up doing some collaboration agreements. You need to have networks with IP attorneys, but your focus will often be on managing, ensuring good protection at reasonable cost, right? So cost management becomes important. When you're talking about valorizing technology assets, this is where technology translation experience and understanding how technology is translated becomes important. For example, in the drug discovery activity, you need to understand how technologies transit from discovery to preclinical, to phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials. What are the timelines involved? What are the costs involved? And so on and so forth. How you can contribute to advancing it through that phase is something which is kept in mind when you're valorizing technology assets. When you're talking about tech marketing and transactions, here you will notice the shift to management disciplines, right? For example, value proposition analysis, marketing and communicating your technology, lead development, networks with technology, your networks with technology scouts. In many large companies today, there are technology scouts who you need to know and meet with and talk to them about various technologies. Deal structuring becomes more important. Understanding of IP law is important, but not to the same extent as an IP protection person would need to know. Valuations, negotiations, contract management, and revenue management, right? Unlike the first category, where it was cost management, you're talking about revenue management here. And venturing is an entirely different world where you're talking about startup experience, seed investing, raising investments, networking with incubators, accelerators, investors, and equity portfolio management as opposed to revenue or cost management as well. But everywhere, there's some amount of portfolio management that you will see happening in all of these. What is the implication of this slide? It means that every organization cannot have people who have all these skill sets. So they need to focus on a few and find people who can do parts of it, sometimes outside. And if you are building a team internally, these are the kind of topics that you need to ensure that people are building upon. Traditional roles, very often it was that people were trained in sciences or engineering and were suddenly one day asked to take care of tech transfer without having any of these backgrounds. And they had to learn on the job. And some did learn quite well. But this is an opportunity, there's an opportunity here to learn some of these things and therefore contribute usefully with your science and engineering or medicine backgrounds to tech transfer activities in productive ways, right? Okay, there are two main approaches in which tech transfer offices work. And I'm just going to briefly mention this to you. We'll talk more in a future date. So there's something called a case management approach, where the assumption is that one case manager takes up one technology and takes it all the way through from sourcing the technology asset from, say, an inventor, doing IP protection, marketing, lead development, deal structuring, negotiation, and contract management. And the other approach is where you pass the baton on to other groups. So there's one person who deals with, say, sourcing and IP protection, another that deals with marketing and lead development, and a third person that deals with, say, deal structuring, valuation, negotiation, and contract management. I, in my own experience, my career, have experimented with both, and I can tell you that I struggle with implementing the case management approach. It requires people who are very versatile, and it is very hard to find such people in Indian context. So it is this approach, which is pass the baton kind of approach, is not perfectly optimal, but this is what seems to work in the Indian context. You do get people who are experienced in parts of it, and you need to put together a sort of like a baton approach of passing it on to the next group, which can actually make it happen. Okay. And then you can outsource some things as a tech transfer office. It's not, seeing that list, I don't want some of you getting scared that it's not possible to do all of that in an organization. It's possible to outsource some of these things. For example, the IP awareness, filing, prosecution. In the US, you'll often find this, except for the awareness and training, being done by IP attorney firms, right? Not necessarily being done in-house. Depending on your procedural flexibilities, you may want to do it in some combination in the Indian context. Technology marketing, lead identification, and so on and so forth. That's possible through technology marketing agencies. Currently, some of the RTTOs are doing it as well. The valuation and IP typically is a specialist activity, and this is something which requires very good judgment and industry understanding. Not too many people would be able to do it, especially for IP, and needs to be built over a period of time. Agreements drafting and suggesting suitable clauses. That there are law firms which will help you do it. Traditional law firms are good at writing agreements, but they need to understand a little bit of IP and so on. RTTOs today also help with that. Management of royalty agreements and equity portfolios. There are entities which will actually you can outsource to as well. Some of the RTTOs, incubators will be willing to do it, but there are also technology asset firms in the US. For example, there are institutions in the US who will actually buy out your royalty agreements entirely. That means they will say, we'll give you something upfront, which will obviously be at a discount, and then they will manage the entire thing afterwards for the rest of the life of the patent. Okay, so that's another possibility. It's not yet so in India, but this is another another activity that happens. Venture creation, of course, incubators can be potential partners. Seed funds, again, incubators can be partners as well. But all said and done, even if you outsource, there'll be some things which will be internal functions, and these are core internal functions. Awareness, training, enabling policies, identifying and sourcing technology assets, right? Working with service providers, contracting it out, portfolio management. You need a database with all your things that you're doing right now. Internal workflows and decision points, extremely important that you identify who's responsible for which decision. When does your director or chancellor get, vice chancellor get involved? When does when who will take decisions on filing decisions, cost or investment decisions, and so on and so forth in terms of patents and so on. Funding allocations and cost management, and finally some of the technology transfer or readiness activities, which typically is done internal to the organization. Funding can come from outside, including things like say BIG or EIR, which is for academic and research organizations that are available today. So finally, just to close quickly, um, some years back, a couple of years back, we wrote an article which was focused on origins of organized technology transfer. And I chose to focus on the NRDC story because interestingly, it goes back to 1953. And I heard from the editors at that time that actually India was actually one of the earliest in championing organized technology transfer in the world. It's actually quite a pioneering kind of an effort that this happened so many years back. And in the current context, it's quite clear that tech transfer is going to be extremely important as India builds an innovation economy. And the government has made it quite clear, even in the recent noise that you're hearing about deep tech startups and so on and so forth, tech transfer is actually at the back end. It is important to make that happen. So it's time to strengthen technology transfer capabilities in all organizations. And I think, uh, I hope some of you would use some of the insights here to build a tech transfer office as well. A quick advertisement for some of you. This is upcoming event coming up in April. Some of you who are interested should sign up. The gentlemen here, the three of them, are stalwarts in the field: Richard Cahoon, John Frazier, and Ashley Stevens. And also, some of the people here that you see are also people who are extremely experienced. Um, and in fact, for example, Raj Irvani has been the chair of the ILS chapter in India. And this will be an opportunity to learn. If some of you are interested, please do look up techtransfer.online and you'll find details for this. But this doesn't end here. We are also going to follow this up with something in Delhi for tech transfer essentials for decision makers, followed by tech transfer in practice is the detailed in-person certificate course between 17th and 21st June. And this will be announced in the same site. And we are also hoping that we'll get a chance to do some advanced half-day modules for specialist tech transfer professionals as well. And this is all courtesy of support from FLCTD program run by UNIDO, along with other partners. And under that, we also hope to put out a tech transfer handbook, TTO handbook, and an online manual, which will again show up in the later part of this year as well. If anybody needs help with some of this, my colleague, Dr. Kavita Parekh, engages in a lot of academic programs. This is her email address, kavita.parekh@venturecenter.co.in, to help with some of these activities. And you can reach me at director@venturecenter.co.in. So I think I'll stop with that. Sorry, I didn't take any questions in between. If there's time, I'll take some questions now. So over to you, Mugdha.
Thank you, Dr. Premnath. So there are actually quite a bit of questions in the chat box. Do you have access to how do you want to do it?
Yeah. So there's a question of what's the status of the national technology transfer policy framing for India that allows institutions to own and license publicly funded research. So the first thing I want to tell you is that there was an effort many years back to try and do a national policy. It was actually, in my opinion, it was wrongly done. Um, um, you have to understand that the US Bayh-Dole Act was done in the context of the US government owning all the IP in 1980. It freed it up and its ownership shifted to universities. In the Indian context, the ownership was very rarely with the government in the first place. So introducing that and creating complications was not a good idea in my opinion. Although there were restrictions which certain government departments placed on the kind of licensing terms you could go for and so on. So that would have been a good move, but to change all of those, and that has happened. So recently, for example, if some of you would like to read, you might want to browse and search for DBT's new tech transfer policies, which is a fairly enlightened one, and it has changed some things compared to what it used to do in the past. DBT used to claim ownership. DBT also used to insist on only non-exclusive, and both these have been changed in the recent past. I hope those best practices will be followed, because it's important to free up the universities and research organizations to act rather than tie them up and have some no-name department or government department in Delhi sort of not giving decisions on what to do, and therefore IP languishing, right? So that is a good one to look at as well. Can universities, sorry, that was Praveen's question. Harish Shagadi has asked, can universities take technology transfer fees, royalty? Are they, as they come under non-profit organizations? Yes, they can. A non-profit organization is defined one which can make a profit, but it cannot distribute the profit to anybody, right? It puts it back in the organization. So the only thing is that you distribute the profit to the owners or the shareholders or the members of the of that organization. You can, as part of your contract with your employee, distribute some return to them as well. So number one, yes, they can do. You can get tech transfer fees. It's not a commercial activity, as I told you. It's aligned with your organization's goals. And number two, you can get a return, distribute it to your employees, but you cannot say if it's you can imagine if there were members in a society, the society members cannot take any money home. All the money goes back into the operations of the organization, right? So I'll go back to the beginning because I might be just taking up the questions at the end. Otherwise, I'll just come back to it. There's a question if there's any government support for TTOs. There are certain programs, programs like which supports an RTTO like us by BIRAC and National Biopharma Mission. In research organizations and academia, typically this is so far being funded internally. I haven't seen too many externally funded programs for TTO creation within that organization. Yeah, thank you, Sangeeta and Manju. I think that was Kindle. Yes, Amazon Kindle. Basically, it was something developed by the MIT Media Lab as a way to read books without a backlit screen, and that you can, many of us benefit from that today too. Ritesh has a question. In academic institutions, how do we go about setting up a TTO? Secondly, what factors decide the need to set up a TTO? I think I have tried to explain this in my talk. I won't repeat it here, but basically, as I told you, TTOs is all about demonstrating value creation for society and the economy by a research or an academic organization. And it's essentially a vehicle to deliver impact, right? And how would you I've given you different ways it can be set up. If you have enough volume of technologies, you might think of it as an entity also or a department. If you don't, you might just build it into an existing activity like Dean of Sponsored Research or something like that, and run it as a a unit of a department. Okay. There's a question from Soumya. For academia, early stage commercialization plays a crucial role in fostering collaboration with industry partners and securing funding for research projects. Could you elaborate on the importance of this in driving innovation and ensuring the successful commercialization of academic research? Yes. So, industry uh, is one of the key ways to take things to market, right? I think in academia, sometimes there's a mindset shift needed to understand what role industry plays. First of all, any kind of business, if it was not there, you would not have profits, therefore you would not have taxes, and therefore you would not have research grants from the government, right? So let's be clear that if you want to be able to fuel academic research, you need to have somebody who is creating profits at the end of the day. And therefore, these entities are extremely important for society. Number two, industry partners bring to you real world problems, and engaging with them in any form, be it consulting, like the UDCT does, ICT Mumbai does with a lot of companies, or through migration of students, your own alumni being in those organizations, or to tech transfer, or to sponsored research, whichever way, I think is very important, because otherwise, we often end up operating as academics in vacuum. We don't have feedback on what is relevant. Sometimes research is done, which, you know, may actually not realize that these are the real issues on the ground. It's just like how, say, if you're doing biomedical research, you need to talk to clinicians who are users, who are going to tell you about the need, the real clinical need. Same way in industry, they are the people who are going to finally understand and take it to market. You need to build those relationships. And if you don't find them, uh, startups, startups are also a form of, a business, you know, uh, unlike the large industry, it's a small company, but for them, it's life and soul, hopefully, and therefore they could be good partners as well. I just wanted to tell you that increasingly research is showing. I hope I'll just quickly put on one more slide for the benefit of you, which is that there's a lot of evidence now emerging that startups are the best friends of researchers because it brings focused attention to translation. And increasingly in the US, that's becoming the norm. That's why you're seeing a lot of cutting edge work happening in startups and then transiting to large companies, including what we saw during COVID as well. So this is something which many of you might want to look at. I also consider them as part of the business world, but not comparable to the large industries, but comparable to some of the smaller companies, comparable to um, uh, emerging high growth businesses, which could be your partners. Okay. Um, there's a question from Giridhar. In a maturer economy like USA, are there reasonable number of problem statements coming from industry and converted to out licensed patents, or is it still mostly inside out? Yeah. So, Giridhar, there was from my reading, I have seen that if you went back about 20 years back, there was a lot of problem statements coming from the industry. Even today, the distance between industry and academia is comparatively smaller, shorter in the US uh, uh, compared to many other parts of the world. But that gap has widened in the recent past. And therefore, you're seeing people coming up with many more ideas and many more startups and getting it, uh, advancing the technology till a point where the industry is really interested. So that's why you're seeing a boom in startups around many universities out there as well. And the proportion of licenses to large companies to licenses to startups is changing in these economies as well. So yes, answer is there are a reasonable number of problems that come, but there are also those which are generated in the startup world by doing a lot of what is called customer discovery. In NSF in the US, for example, has created a program called ICORP, which GDC and IIT Madras is trying to run, which basically is about customer discovery, getting researchers familiar with how to discover market needs, customer needs, define them, and then try and solve them in their research as well. So if some of you are interested, do Google ICORP program of the NSF and the customer discovery process that they use, which Gopal Krishnan Deshpande Center at IIT Madras is today trying to champion as well. So Shamal Bose has a question. Is only academia supported by TPOs? I know a couple of industry experts who left their jobs to come with high-risk startups unable to sustain. Later, some companies hired them as independent contractors, installed their work and got $1 million plus. Does the government support such individuals? Individuals are now back as an employee heading similar programs. So guidance, I think, is available. The RTPOs are open to all individual inventors as well. It is I mean, one should not worry. I mean, I feel that there are ways by which it is possible to be conservative and careful in how you go about its commercialization without being paranoid. And it's important to not be paranoid, because if you do that, you cannot discuss the scope and the potential of your idea with potential funders and partners. It becomes quite important to do that as well, right? So, can university take technology transfer fees, royalties? I think I've covered that. So this is okay.
Yeah,
Slides will be available. Yeah, go ahead, please. Mugdha.
yeah, just a moment before you take the next question. Let me alert the participants. The feedback link is in the chat box. Please do not leave the session without giving your feedback. Your feedback helps us for the further sessions also. Yeah, over to you, Dr. Premnath.
I know we are about 20 minutes ahead, beyond 5, so we should close in a short while, so I can take up some questions separately. But let me just take a few more and then close. Is there a compilation of tech IP repositories available for licensing for entrepreneurs? Yes, there are. There are some which are both globally and in India. The quality of it and whether it gives you all the information you need to take a view on usefulness of it is something which you know uh, is variable. There are databases available, and I can separately point them to you. The US one, if you want a model, the US one, there's one called the Autumn Innovation Marketplace. If you Google that, you'll find it. You'll be able to search through it as well. There are equivalent ones available around uh, the world. In India, the RTTOs, all the RTTOs supported by BIRAC NBM have put out some of these in their databases. Some are also available through the site of NBM. Um, but I think that said, that gives you a flavor of the technology, but to understand it more, once you've narrowed it down, you often need to dig a little deeper, and it helps to have conversations with technology managers who are managing those particular portfolios. So I would suggest talk to the RTTOs, write to them, tell them, I'm interested in this. Do you have something in this technology? And take it ahead as well. By the way, the next talk in this series is going to be by Professor Anil Gupta on frugal innovations. He's a Padma Shri and professor from IIM Ahmedabad, who set up the National Innovation Foundation. And also, Shishti, some of you might want to benefit from that. I think I've covered the question from Mahesh Pitagiri about KPI.
Which
Sorry?
Dr. just announced. Just note the change in the date. This is happening on a Monday rather than on a Tuesday, because Professor Anil Gupta was not available on Tuesday, so it will happen on Monday, 21st of April at 4 o'clock. Please note the change.
Okay, so I think we are on to the final couple of questions. What KPIs do you suggest for tracking the success of a nascent TTO in the first 2 to 3 years beyond just patents and licenses? Yeah, so those I had listed as, if you remember, I had listed them as outputs, right? Uh, and I just wanted to draw your attention to that. These are short-term metrics in terms of the number of technology assets are available in your portfolio. What are the patents filed? Expressions of interest by industry could be one more indicator, because that also is an indicator for tech marketing activities which otherwise are not there. Agreements, some earnings, and so on. But these are short-term indicators. You could also build a database of, all the industry partners that you engage with, scouts that you engage with, and build those partnerships. There could also be some other outcomes. Sometimes you show technology to an industry partner, but they ask you, can you do consulting for us? Can you do sponsored research for us? So those also sponsored research projects that emerge out of such conversations, consulting activities that emerge out of such conversations can also be outputs that you can list in the short term. I hope that helps. But the rest, outcomes and impact, please keep that in mind. Make sure they don't get misaligned. One common problem is everybody focuses on outputs, forgets outputs, outcomes, and impacts. So there's misalignment between them as well, right? Anchal has a question. Can you please elaborate on the ways which an academic institution can evaluate with a priority list of innovations to focus on for their transfer and commercialization? Right. Um, I did say that it's difficult to pick winners. So the way I would suggest you do is if you have a pipeline of many, then at low cost, advance them at least to the next level. Okay. Um, that means, so for example, an Indian patent doesn't cost much. Okay. It's possible to advance it at least that far, right? You don't need to take a decision on something thinking what will happen 5 years from now if the cost is not as much, right? And as you advance it, you'll find that you'll learn a lot more about the technology, about what the industry partners think about it, and so on. And that is the kind of feedback that you need to collect in order to evaluate and make a priority list of innovations. Um, the best feedback you get from people who understand industry priorities and understand that sector, not necessarily academics who could be often enamored by the science behind it. So it's a good idea to create a small group of people who informally give you inputs on what they think is interesting about a technology and why they think somebody will be interested and why they would be interested. So if you look at TechX, which is the RTTO at Venture Center, we do a tech showcase. And when we do that showcase, we have found that in those showcases, the most useful inputs we get are from uh, industry experts who we bring in as advisors. Okay. So if you want to do a shortlist, try and build a bunch of experts who are well wishers, could be your alumni, could be people from your networks who can give you a few inputs on evaluating this. The most important thing to identify is what's called value proposition against other alternatives. If a licensee is interested in your technology, why would they be interested compared to the other alternatives that they have available to them? And that is the most important question to address when you're prioritizing these technologies. Okay. Okay. Final question here about from Ravi Kumar on Tiwari on how to decide if to license as royalty or one-time license fee. If you This is a question which has to be thought through a little more carefully. I gave you some data point where in Columbia Tech Ventures, most of their earnings came from royalty, which came much later, right? That is assuming that you are licensing to people who will be scrupulous, will be honest in reporting their sales, and that you have mechanisms to enforce that honesty. Uh, in which case, royalties are the way to go, right? It also shares the risk along with the licensee. So you're sharing risk and reward both, right, as an organization. On the other hand, as increasingly, if there's a situation where you feel that licensees are not being honest and they just want to, take the license and then not interact with that research organization, which, by the way, is a fear that many research organizations have. In that case, increasingly the deal structuring tilts towards the upfront fee, right? I don't think that's healthy. That is not necessarily a good way to go. It sometimes um, takes away money from somebody who is licensed, from the licensee who could use it for advancing it. Therefore, it actually ends up in net low value creation for both the university and for the licensee. But this is a matter of not just about how to do it, but about the kind of agreements you can set up, how you can uh, monitor and enforce those agreements, and how much trust you can create between the licensee and the licensor. There's no easy answer to it. We will be discussing this in the 5-day course that we are running in June. So please join in if you are interested. It's free, but we'll have limited seats. So people who are really keen and have a reason to join in, please do. Others we will take up in a future date as well. I think I'm almost done. There's one question about AI in PTO. what role AI will play. Actually, AI is actually becoming a good way to do your research for many tech transfer professionals in order to build a case for value propositions, market sizes, industry analysis, and so on and so forth, the preliminary work that you can do. You can also, in principle, use AI to build agreement drafts and so on and so forth. That's possible, the first draft, but please don't blindly follow it. It's extremely risky. Uh, you know, AI tools hallucinate, and you don't want to show up hallucinating in front of an industry partner if you're a tech transfer professional. Okay, so thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. And with that, we close. If you have time, please do fill up the feedback form. That will help us. It's on the chat box. Okay, over to Mugdha. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Premnath. So as he said, please fill up the feedback form before leaving this session. Also an alert about the change of date for the next talk, which is coming up on Monday, 21st April at the same time, which is 4 o'clock. So instead of 22nd April, we will meet you all on 21st of April at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.